a little ASMR. Buenos días, I am the Brewmaster, pero antes de comenzar, solo quería decir Feliz Día de Acción de Gracias, or in other words, Happy Thanksgiving. It occurs to me that many people are probably going to be getting together, many groups of tabletop RPG players will be getting together to play games, probably for the first time in a long time, thanks to the holiday that's going to be happening tomorrow. And I am very shortly going to be getting back to my own missus and my little one. But I figured I would give a little bit of advice, or at least an alternate mindset to those who want to play some RPGs this holiday season. Something that might make your table feel a little bit more dynamic. So the philosophy is that in this mode of play, you as the GM have a more impartial role. You're not so much focused on making a hard, concrete story. It's more about letting the dice tell the story. And in this role, you play more of the oracle, and that is what I call this approach. And what is the benefit of this? And what does that even mean? And so the core of that oracle principle is that when the characters or when the players ask you to generate content, or they're asking you for something, you as the GM default to rolling dice to determine what the outcomes of those things will be. And you also act as an interface for the players to roll their own oracles. What is an oracle? It's just basically a random table. It's a terminology that's used in Ironsworn, and one that I like. So the benefit of this is that you as the GM are not thinking of new content all the time. There's no brain drain, and you don't have to worry about writer's block because you aren't having to write all of this content. You roll on a random table, you look at the result, and then very quickly you'll start to see some things that will make sense in your scenario. And if not, you disregard that roll and you make a different roll. There's also various ways to use what's called a fate chart. You roll on that chart and it'll give you a yes and a no. It sounds more complicated than it really is, and there are already various videos on YouTube about how to use a fate chart, so I'm not going to bother making one of those, but I would highly suggest that you use a fate chart if you don't already. The other benefit of this is that it assuages the player's anger. So when the players ask you for a question that's yes or no, but you as the DM haven't already considered the possibility of such a thing, you can roll on the fate chart to determine based on the likelihood that you think. So if you want something to be 65% likely and you roll on it and it's above that 65%, then it happens. And if the players understand that when they ask you, you're going to be generating these results randomly, then when they get results that they don't like or that aren't favorable, they don't blame you. And that actually solves a lot of problems when it comes to tension at the table, where the players feel like, oh, my DM's always telling me no. Well, no, you're rolling on the fate chart, and maybe your dice just aren't rolling in their favor. And every player is going to understand that. And the benefit of this, though, is that there will be times where your dice do roll in their favor and they do get a lot of those critical yeses that they're really looking for. And that adds that storytelling, which leads me into my next point, which is the storytelling. When you roll these dice and when you add more die rolls into your game, what inevitably happens is that the fluctuation and the randomness that the dice creates injects more storytelling, but that happens naturally and innately because the game is, of course, a dice game. So all of that, random rolling on the d20 and the randomization and adding the flat bonuses and all that just builds on top of each other, and it integrates well into a game like Dungeons and Dragons, or even a game like Call of Cthulhu, or I would say any game. Basically any game that has a narrative focus is going to benefit from an oracle style of play. And again, this is just an option. This is not to say that you should run every game or every table this way, but if you want something that's a little bit more randomized and a little bit more fun, and it's going to be looser, because this will put a lot more creativity in the hands of the players, and I'll explain how in a second. But the basic goal of this is just to generate some variety. So how do you go about doing this? How do you actually do this? What is the mechanical process? You let the dice determine as much of the unknown as possible. So you will still, as the DM, generate the module. You'll still create your dungeon and plan out your monsters and your stat blocks and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to things that you haven't considered, those things you let be generated by chance. And indeed, you should design certain aspects of your game to be generated by chance. So when it comes to loot, a lot of DMs already roll up their loot, but answer the questions of quantity with a die amount. If a player says, how many potions do I find? you may just want to tell them they find 2 health potions. But with this philosophy, you will say they find 1d4. And what is usually the method that I like to use when I do this is that I use a die amount that's about the average of what I feel would be there. So if I feel that there would be 2 potions there, then I tell them they find 1d4. They might roll a 4, in which case they found like a cache, and that's what I'll describe it. If they find only 1 potion, I'll tell them that they find a dirty, scratched up potion that someone squirreled away. And I would suggest doing this with the coin and the money especially as well. Tell them that they find 2d100 copper, 5d10 platinum, or 2d20 gold pieces, and let the player roll that amount and see what they come up with. When players roll really, really, really low, the look on their face when they roll 2d100, but they literally roll 1 on both 100 die, which I've seen, it is literally hilarious. But then also when they accidentally roll a treasure trove, where they roll maximum on every single die and they really get like a loot haul. All of that adds that storytelling, because then you as the GM get to ask those questions like, well, why is there so much loot, or why is there so little loot? And if you really want to let the dice determine those answers too, then you can even roll on your fate chart. And by doing this method, I have generated entire backstories for characters, created political intrigue between weaving factions, and discovered all sorts of things about my world that I wouldn't have if I had just simply tried to force myself to make a whole world out of my brain all at once, which is frankly not realistic unless you really derive your joy from that. And that's okay too, if you really do derive your joy from writing that. But if you're not getting paid, there's no reason why you should put that much stress on yourself. Just roll some dice and allow yourself to relax into the story that's going to emerge from that, because a story will emerge from that. There's no helping it. Another thing that I like to do is the cost of items. Roll 1d4. How much does this cost? I can tell them that the sword costs 1d6 gold pieces, and they'll roll that. And if they roll a 6, then I'm going to say, this is a very fine sword. Like the sword that they do find is worth 6 gold pieces, so it's worth the maximum amount that it could be worth based on the die amount that I assigned. So that's like a great sword, right? And they then have the option to barter for that, and I have a whole other barter system where they can try to get the price down lower if they feel like it's too high. But again, rolling that adds that role play, because then if they try to barter down from that 6 that they rolled, then I'm going to have the NPC say, but no, this is my finest sword. You can't have it for any less than that. And he's then going to instead then reconsider the price of the sword and think that 6 is too low now that he's talked about it out loud, and he's going to try to barter that price higher than 6. And then that, of course, adds to that role play. And of course, that's only going to be in a situation where you and your players are role playing shopping. Of course, you don't always want to do that. And I don't always role play shopping. Sometimes you just basically go into some menus and select your gear. But if you are running something that's more roleplay heavy, or you want more social interaction to inject naturally into your game, then this is a way to do it. It's also effective to use this to measure increments of time. So if you want to know how long this potion is going to last, well, when you homebrew that potion, you tell them that it'll last 1d6 hours, 1d12 hours, 2d6 hours, all the way up to 4d6 hours, because that would be 24 hours. Or when it comes to traveling, if you're doing some sort of hex crawl, or if you're using sort of loose association where your characters are traveling between basically hub to hub, and so you haven't established firmly the distance between place, and so the character's like, well, how long is it going to take us to travel from this village to this other village? Make a nature check. He makes a nature check, and of course he rolls super high because he's a ranger or a druid, and they can tell that based on the shrubbery and all of the stuff around and the landscape, blah 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 blah, that it's going to take them 1d6 days to travel. And then they get to roll that 1d6 and see how many days it's actually going to take. But if they're trying to get to a place in just 2 or 3 days because they're on a time limit, and I strongly suggest having time limits if you're a DM to get those players moving, then this will create a lot of dramatic tension, because they're going to roll that die and everybody's on the edge of their seat hoping that it's not going to take them longer than a few days. Because if they roll a 6 but they're trying to get to a place in 2 days, then there becomes a problem. Are they going to get to that village in time? Then that is a problem. What can we do to still get there on time? And now they're going to have to bust out all types of spells, all types of magic. They're going to have to wild shape and fly. They're going to have to figure something out, because just traveling on foot is not going to work. And again, this creates more natural role play, and there you go, there's a quest, or there's an obstacle, there's something in the way that wasn't there before, and that already gets the players more engaged in your game. And just rolling a couple dice like this and having like problems pop up out of nowhere might send your players off on a whole quest that takes up your entire table time, and you never even get to the stuff that you prepared. And that's okay, because your players will make their way back to that stuff. And if they do get too derailed, then there are methods of injecting content that has been bypassed by the players and just kind of putting that back into their path again. But again, those are some other techniques and tools that I'll probably talk about at a later time. And if you're feeling kind of weird or just feel like experimenting with something new, then I might even consider injecting these very nifty weird dice, which have a variety of very strange proprietary dice. I mean, we're talking D3s, D5s, D7s, D14, D16, D24, and a D30. So, how long will my curse status last? The player asks. Well, roll a D24 and just give them that die and see the look on their face when they look at that and like, what the fuck is this? Yeah, it's so much fun. So I suggest getting these and playing around with them and just, having a little fun. If you are interested in something like this, though, I do also recommend going down to your local game store and buying them if at all possible. Because, go ahead and support your local game store. And if you travel the Bay Area as I do, then I got these dice from Gamescape North. Take the 580 just over the Richmond Bridge, and you'll find yourself there in no time. But yeah, if you liked the video and you found anything that I've said here useful or informative, then please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. Check us out on Reddit, Patreon, and stay tuned for our Dragon Rider season, which will be showcasing our homebrew class that we've created. And we're going to be doing basically a live play, but it's going to be way more dynamic than that. And I'm going to put into practice everything that I show on my channel here. Everything I'm teaching here, you're going to see it in practice on that show. And so make sure you stay tuned for that. It'll be exciting. It'll be fun. And I can't wait to unveil everything that we have in store for you. So keep your eyes open for updates on that. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Look after each other. Be safe. Enjoy that lovely bird. And peace.